afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Farmers and gardeners in the Northeast have a new resource to help expand or diversify their businesses. Global Food, Local Food is a publication from UVM Center for Sustainable Agriculture. UVM partnered with the New Farms for New Americans program of the Association of Africans Living in Vermont. Global Food, Local Food is a guide to growing, harvesting, and preserving African and Asian crops in the Northeast. The idea is to help local farmers adapt important crops from cultures around the world into the local food system. To find out more, I'm joined by Ben Waterman and Alisha Laramee. Ben is the coordinator of the New Farmer program with UVM Center for Sustainable Agriculture, and Alisha is a program specialist for the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, New Farms for New Americans program. Thanks to both of you for coming in. Now, Ben, what inspired you to write the Global Food, Local Food Guide?
Well, for the past several years, we've had the honor and privilege of working with resettled refugee farmers and gardeners who are now settled in the Burlington area. They're coming from countries from all over the world, and they have farming and gardening backgrounds. So they're currently established on various farming and gardening plots throughout the Burlington area. And they've brought with them a real wealth of knowledge and information in terms of farming and gardening. So they're growing all sorts of interesting and unique crops. It seems like a new one pops up in the garden every day that we've never seen before. They've got unique cultivation methods and food processing methods, and we felt like it would be a great idea to share some of this information and gardening knowledge and wisdom from global cultures with everyday farmers and gardeners who are interested in exploring and trying something new.
So tell me a little bit about some of the crops that are featured in the guide, and Alisha, you can jump in too.
Well, we feature crops. There are so many crops that we could have featured. We're barely scratching the surface here. But we do feature 8 crops that are both culturally important and highly adaptable to the local food landscape. So we've got bitter melon, that's what you see there. Rice, you can grow rice if you've got the right seed and a little bit of knowledge. We feature other crops like African eggplant you're seeing there. It's a little bit more bitter variety of eggplant, but very popular in cultures across the world. So we have a nice variety of interesting crops and methods for people to try.
And so in here too, it's not only about the crop, but it's about what to do with the crop, which I think is really interesting. It tells people, oh, you can use it for this, because you know, you'd look at this vegetable or this thing that you would see and what am I going to do with this?
And I think some things are really simple, like the amaranth that we featured that a lot of people are familiar with, but with the groups that we work with, I mean, that's like it's the equivalent of eating spinach. It's a staple crop for a lot of folks, and it's super easy to cook it up just the same way you would spinach. In some cases, it might be a familiar crop like daikon, for example.
Which is a radish.
Which is a radish, and a lot of people are familiar with that. But the book, for example, highlights a new way of preserving the crop that people are not used to. So the Bhutanese, for example, have a really extensive fermentation process to preserve the daikon. So the book goes into, you know, maybe some things that are really easy to do something with, and other things that it just gives you a new idea of a crop that you might already know and be familiar with.
And tell me too a little bit about the fact that you also list resources for where to get the seeds to grow some of these things. Is that difficult to come by?
Well, finding the right variety is hard. So, you know, we can source seeds locally in some cases, but it may not be the right flavor. And then when I talk to farmers, people will say, yeah, that's the right seed, but it just doesn't taste the same as in Bhutan. And I think, you know, it's a combination of climate and soil and all the different things that go into the way a crop might taste. But yeah, you can source them online, and we give lots of references to where you could get those seeds if you want, and you can't find them locally, and it's really easy to do.
And have either of you tried to grow any of these crops?
Then you have some experience.
I'm really terrible at growing sweet corn. I can't grow it for the life of me. But I did plant African corn in my garden, and it booms. It's really easy to grow. Very vigorous growing corn plant. So I've had some success with that. And daikon is a crop that we feature in this book. It's used for soil improvement. A lot of farmers across the nation here use it to drill into the subsoil and use it as a soil quality enhancer. So I've experimented with that as well.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about, I'm intrigued by the corn. How does the taste differ?
Well, it's actually not a sweet corn. It's more like a feed corn, but it's used for flour. But the best way to eat African corn is to toast it. You really kind of right before it gets overripe, you just on a campfire or on a grill, toast it so it gets kind of golden brown. It's a really unique caramel type flavor to it.
And so, Alisha, who are the farmers featured in this guide? Because there are a lot of stories that are really interesting.
So New Farms for New Americans has been working with farmers for the last 8 years, and the majority of our farmers are from Bhutan. We have farmers from Somalia and Burundi. That would be the mass makeup of our farmers. They generally we have older folks that farm with us. I mean, in terms of the demographic, with the Bhutanese, we have older, as in grandparents' age, that farm with us, and the Burundians and the Somali Bantu that farm with us, they are usually anywhere from mid to older. But we don't see a lot of youth farming with us, and that's one thing that we would really like to change, is to get some interest in the younger folks.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for a lot of folks, when they've come from situations where their lives have been really precarious and living in poverty, that farming isn't necessarily the first thing that people want to do when they have an opportunity for education.
Well, it's a lot of work.
And it's a lot of work. So it doesn't have quite the same glamour that it does for folks here sometimes. So if they can get a secure job that will feed their family and have a steady income and all of that, I think that's where some of the younger people are putting their energy into going to college and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And tell me too a little bit about some of the tools that are used, because there's some unique things in this booklet that are highlighted that are used by folks for farming these particular crops.
So we feature one tool, here's a little image of it, the asuka, or the kodalo in Nepali, but this is it's also called the Grub Hoe, and it's basically
I'm just going to hold this up again.
Sure. It's a very sturdy hoe, and this is for so many of the folks. People are coming into my office all the time right now asking if they could buy them. You can't buy them locally. There's a few places across the nation that sell them online. So I'm putting in orders now for these hoes, and there's no end in sight to the number of people coming through my doors right now wanting to get one of these, and they're popular, and they come in different length shafts, and depending on the size or the height of the person, they'll order different shaft size. And yeah, I don't see them anywhere here. I've never seen them locally.
Interesting. So this booklet, people at first blush might think, oh, this is a book for new Americans and how to farm, but it's not. It's for farmers to learn how to do some new crops.
And farmers and gardeners, you don't have to be a serious, you can be just a backyard gardener and kitchen gardener and try out one of the new crops. And I think it's also for people who are interested in maybe meeting their neighbors in the community gardens. So they might have a small plot, and next to them is someone who's growing from someone that's Somali Bantu, for example, and they see some of the African eggplants, and now they have a resource. They can, even if language is a barrier, they can start to connect over some of the crops featured. You can bring the book with you to the garden and say, oh, this is what you're growing, and strike up a conversation. So. And
there are also recipes. Ben, tell me, how did you get the recipes?
Well, some of our staff from the Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Cheryl Herrick and Jennifer Brown, did some real investigative work. They visited the kitchens of our farming and gardening friends, and they documented the recipes. They literally brought in measuring cups and teaspoons, because the ingredients and the measuring systems tend to be different across cultures. So they documented the recipes. So a really good example. I always think of Alisha's tickle story. It's a really good example of how things can be translated in unique ways.
I was working with a Burmese farmer and was trying to I just wanted one recipe, and I said, okay, can you give me the recipe? And it was taking him a long time, and I said, let's just write it down. Come on, we'll do it really fast. And what we realized is that everything was measured in tickles, and we had to figure out what a tickle was and the equivalent of a tickle in U.S. measurements. And then it wasn't just tickles; there were all these other. And for example, a lot of people measure things in rice spoon, so it's 8 rice spoons, and figuring out what that actually is, the size of a rice spoon and the size of a tickle.
So, what's a tickle?
It's featured in the book. I don't know off the top of my head what those are. A tickle. I can look it up really quickly.
Is it like a teaspoon?
A tablespoon is measured as an eating rice spoon, and 1 tickle in English is a measurement in Burma equal to 0.576 ounces, and 100 tickles is equal to 1 vis.
Wow, so that's great. So what kind of response have you had to this guide so far?
I think people are really curious and excited about it. It's giving them a window into a world that people have been wanting for a while, and a way to connect, especially in the community gardens. So now they have, they have this window into this other world, and they have an opportunity to converse. At least that's what I'm hearing locally, and I don't know what you're hearing in terms of producers.
Yeah, well, I think there's something in this book for everyone. There's something in there for a market gardener, a farmer in business. There are different crops that could be used to diversify businesses. There's something in there for gardeners, as Alisha mentioned, and there's something in there for anthropologists and chefs who are looking to try different recipes and cater to ethnic food markets. So it's a really interesting little resource.
Do you have to have a lot of space, a lot of land to try some of these things out?
No, I don't have a lot of land, and I'm trying at least 3 or 4 new crops this summer in my backyard, and mostly because of this guide. I've seen them growing in the fields for a long time, but I just said, oh, that's what the Bhutanese grow, and that's what the Somali Bantu grow, but I've never actually tried it myself. So I have a small garden in my backyard, and I'll try a bunch of different things.
Tell me, too, about some of the people who are featured in this booklet, because there's some amazing stories.
Well, 2 of the people featured, for example, one of them, Indra Khadka, she's been farming with us since she moved to Vermont 8 years ago. So she was one of our first farmers with New Farms for New Americans. And she was, her family, they were all farmers back in Bhutan. They grew everything from 20 acres of rice. They had animals, they had everything. And she talks about moving here and wanting to find a connection to this place, and knowing that right away she wanted to be able to garden, and she wanted to be able to feed her family. And she now feeds over 20 people with her garden. Another person we feature, Abdi, he talks about, did farming in Somalia. He has a background in agriculture, and he just sees this as an opportunity to feed his family, feed his neighbors, and a lot of people, to connect with the culturally significant crops that they can't find in grocery stores, or at least when they came here they couldn't. They're starting to pop up more and more, but it's a way for people to build community just because they can offer it up to their friends. When they might not have any other gifts to give, they now can share their African corn, which
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah.
And so how can viewers get a copy of Global Food, Local Food, Ben?
Well, it's totally free for download online, so they can download the entire booklet on the Center for Sustainable Agriculture website at uvm.edu/sustainable agriculture, or they can give our office a call at 802-656-5459.
And how about if someone wants a hard copy of the guide so they can take it in the garden with them?
So New Farms for New Americans and ALV, Association of Africans Living in Vermont, we are selling these as a fundraiser to support the program and support the farmers to buy these seeds and give them out, so that people can go to aalv-vt.org and go to the New Farms for New Americans page on that website, or give me a call at 802-343-7007.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today. It's a fascinating booklet, really interesting stuff. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.